convenience store, Bill Shields is going to tell us about a very patient father. Mr. Bill Shields, our patient father.
My story takes place in 1961, and I am 14 years old. And I get a call from my buddy Dave, who lives about 10 houses down the street. And he lets me know that his parents are going to be out that night. They're leaving, and he has to babysit his sister. So he asked me if I can come down and spend the night. So I check it out with Mom and Dad. I get the okay and head on down to Dave's house. And I've been down there a couple hours, and we're watching movies, and his sister's asleep in the back bedroom. And Dave walks in from the kitchen, and I hear something jingle in his hand. I look up and I said, "What do you got?" He's got a grin on his face. He says, "I got the keys to the car. Do you want to go for a ride?" I said, "Heck yes." So we walk outside. He's got it's a Datsun. It's a stick shift. I've never driven a stick shift, but Dave's pretty good at it. So we get in the car, and Dave starts it up and backs out of the driveway, and he drives around the neighborhood 3 or 4 times, slowly. And everything's cool. And he just pulls into the end of the driveway, and he says, "You want to give it a try?" I said, "Well, I've never driven a stick shift. Actually, I've never driven a car." And he says, "Well, you can just stay in first gear. I'll get you going, and you're fine. So we only have about 100 feet to go, so it'll be okay." So I get it in first gear, and it shakes and whatnot, and then I kind of get going about 10 miles an hour. And at the end of this driveway, there's 3 floor-to-ceiling picture windows. So I'm only doing about 10, 12 miles an hour, and I get about halfway down, and Dave says, "You might want to slow down." And it just doesn't work for me. I'm kind of going, I'm not sure how to slow it. He said, now I'm about 25 feet away from the house, and Dave is screaming, "Hit the brake!" And I hit it. And he screams, "That's the clutch!" As I plow through all 3 picture windows. And the front end of the car is now in the rec room. So Dave's to my right, and he's just got his hands on the dashboard, and he just keeps saying, "No, no, no." I have my hands on this, glued to the steering wheel, and I just haven't even moved. I'm just in shock. We're sitting there probably, I don't know, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then I hear a laugh to my left. And I look out the window, and there is our neighbor, Charlie Fullerton.
Oh boy.
Now, 2 weeks prior to this, we had wired Charlie's car with a smoke bomb. And he knew who did it, but he couldn't prove it. He was having a good time. And he just looked down at me and he said, "Shields, I don't think you're getting out of this one." And then he walked away laughing. So Dave and I are sitting there with glass everywhere. And Dave suggests, we're trying to figure out what to do next. And Dave suggests that I just stay there, wait for his parents to come home, and we'll talk to them, and then whatever. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I said, "Dave, I just can't do that. I got to go home and tell my parents what happened." I said, I gotta confess. I said, I was brought up Catholic. I'm good at this. So I head on down the street to go home. And on the way home, I have a chance to reflect on the last 6 months. And in the last 6 months, I shot out a window in a car with a BB gun. I put a baseball through a window at school. And I put my elbow through a window at the same school. So I've had a lot of experience with broken glass. So I head home, I walk in the house, and my father, my mother, and my aunt are all sitting in the living room. And they just look up, and they know something's wrong. And I recount what has happened down the street. And my aunt and my mom don't say a word. They're just in a little bit of shock. And my dad, who's the caretaker of Bill, said, okay, let's go down and take a look at this mess. So he and I leave the house and we go down and take a look at, really was a mess. Got a garbage can, picked up as much of the glass as we could. We shoved the car out of the rec room. And he turned to Dave and he said, just have your parents call me. He said, we're going back home. Have your parents call me when they get home. Dave says, okay. So my dad and I walk back home silently. We get back to the house. And my dad says, son, I just want you to go downstairs and go to bed, and I'll talk to you in the morning. I said, okay. So I walk downstairs, I go into my bedroom, and I'm feeling pretty good because I assumed a little capital punishment as a result of this, and it didn't happen. So before I go to bed or get ready for bed, I look over in the corner of the bedroom. And my brother had just come back from Mexico about 4 months prior, and he brought a bullwhip with him. And I thought to myself, I'll just crack this bullwhip one time, and then I'll go to bed. So I walked over, picked up the bullwhip, and I walked back in the middle of the room where I had the greatest amount of room, and I pulled the bullwhip behind my back, and when I did, it shattered the glass light fixture in the ceiling. The sound of that glass fixture was, to me, louder than what happened when I drove through 3-picture windows. And I know that everybody can hear it. Now you switch to upstairs, and I hear this from my father later, but they hear this noise. And again, my mother and my aunt are just shocked. Can't believe what they heard. And my dad just looks at him and he goes, my God, he's been gone for 5 minutes. So I hear Dad coming down the stairs. I hear every stair he hits. And he walks in the door, and I am still poised like this. I haven't moved. Well, I still have the bullwhip behind my back like this after shattering this glass. My dad walks in and he just shakes his head a little bit, and he walks over and he picks up a garbage can, and he walks over to me and he picks the glass out of my hair and off of my shoulders, puts it in the garbage can, sets it down, and he says, okay, son, I want you to get into bed. I don't want you to touch a thing. I just want you to get into bed. Do you understand? I said, yes, I do. I go over and I sit on the edge of the bed and I go to take my shoes off. My dad says, "Son, you're not listening to me. That I told you not to touch a thing." I said, "Okay, I get it." Get into bed, shoes, clothes on, everything. Pull the covers over. My dad backs out of the room, turns off the light, walks back upstairs to report this all to my mother and my aunt, of course. That wasn't, the interesting thing about this story, beyond what you have heard, is that my father told this story for years after this. And every time he told it, he would get to the point where they were sitting in the living room and they heard this crash. And he would be laughing so hard that tears would come down, and he couldn't finish. And he would just say, he would finish the story by saying, and then. He couldn't even finish it. So he was an extremely patient man. And I know I tested his patience many times in years after that, but that's another story.